One story caught my eye in the Mail on Sunday today, and that was an article about a school chaplain who claimed he was betrayed by the Church of England after it branded him a safeguarding risk, not just to children, but to vulnerable people, for giving a sermon on identity politics. There's been plenty of coverage of Reverend Bernard Randall and his journey since he was sacked from Trent College and reported to terrorism watchdogs for defending pupils' rights to question the introduction of a new LGBT policy. He's now taken legal action against the school and will argue that he was unfairly sacked at an employment tribunal this week. The head of Trent College has previously said that the school has been and remains committed to defending the case and will continue to respect the tribunal process and its decisions. The school maintains it was following established safeguarding practice. Interesting. Reverend Dr. Bernard Randall joins me in the studio. First of all, thank you very much. It's good to see you here. But I'm sorry about the reason you're called here. The fact that, well, let's start at the beginning. What were you preaching about? What were you talking about?
I was asked by a pupil to address the fact that the school had introduced this, Educate and Celebrate, but it's similar to Stonewall and other organisations that come in and push a very aggressive LGBT ideology.
Right.
And people had said to me, how come we're told we have to accept this LGBT stuff in a Christian school?
It's a good question.
I thought it was a very good question and fair, because it's not saying what's right or wrong.
No.
It's, what are we allowed to think? So I gave a sermon saying you are allowed to think for yourself.
Okay.
That was the key thing. Respect the people you disagree with. No personal attacks, no abuse. That is unacceptable.
Yep.
But if you make up your mind that actually you want to follow traditional Christian values or other philosophical views on these things, you are allowed to do that.
Now, that's a very liberal sermon. I would have probably said you need to go further and say, actually, this is antithesis to Christian teaching, and we believe that there is one woman, one man in marriage, and that is a sacrament. I would have said go further and go harder, but you were quite liberal. You said you can believe that, or you can believe this, it's fine.
Yes, and I was very conscious that I wasn't speaking to a purely Christian group of young people, and therefore it's fair to be moderate. That's what I aim for. And actually I am.
Yeah.
I understand people have different points of view.
Yeah.
Freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech all mean that everybody's entitled to express their viewpoint. I have my own views, which are clear, but I understand and respect other people's viewpoints. And
So, Father, what was the consequence of that?
the consequence from the school was that I was sacked for gross misconduct, reported to Prevent, the anti-terror watchdog, and reported as a safeguarding risk.
Based on what?
Based on having unacceptable views, it appears. It's not very clear. They said to me, how come you're saying this? And I said, well, it's the Church of England's own teaching. And the fact that I wasn't willing to say it's not the Church's teaching, or I don't accept the Church's teaching, despite being a minister of the Church of England, apparently that was too extreme, too hardline, just to say this is the Church's teaching and that's what we've got.
That's quite literally a chaplain's role.
I thought so.
To teach Christian teaching.
Apparently, the senior leadership of the school disagreed. I think the chaplain's job is just to say, be nice to people and leave it at that.
That's what Christianity is all about, isn't it? Being nice, not being good. We won't get into that, though.
No, let's not.
Was this a Christian school?
So this is a Christian school, a Church of England foundation school. So it should have been possible for anybody to say those things, but absolutely a chaplain in a chapel service, a sermon, in an act of worship, should have been able to say, you may take traditional Christian views on these things. OK, so I'm assuming, because your school sounds horrendous, it sounds like you had an activist head teacher. I won't ask you to confirm or deny that, but it sounds to me a terrible place to work. I'm assuming that your diocese and the local clergy, the hierarchy, I'm assuming they backed you up and they had your back and said, yeah, this is a good Christian teacher, this is a good pastor doing his job. Sadly not. No. And I'd like to say, actually, in many ways, it's a great place to work. Lots of the other colleagues, other staff, are brilliant.
It's very charitable of you.
It's true. It is, and I absolutely mean it. But, yeah, the diocese, not so much. So they got hold of this idea if there was a safeguarding problem, teaching the Church of England's teaching, and they said, we need to assess this, and they decided there was a risk to children and vulnerable adults. If they talked to me, I might somehow harm them because I hold the Church's own teaching.
Did they acknowledge that it's the Church's teaching?
Well, interestingly, the safeguarding officer, when she wrote up an assessment of me, said his opinions, Reverend Randall's views, rather than ever saying it's the Church's views.
Did you ever question where you got these opinions
The
from?
real kicker at the end of the assessment was because of some scripture supporting Reverend Randall's views, the church itself is a risk factor.
Oh my gosh.
So employed by the Church of England thinks that the Church of England is a safeguarding risk.
The crux right there, that is the Church of England right there. It thinks it is a safeguarding risk to the people of the United Kingdom, which is why it won't preach the good word anymore.
And I want to say there are many faithful pastors, vicars, ministers up and down the Church of England.
And they're being let down by the hierarchy.
And the hierarchy, the officialdom, the managerial class of the Church of England is afraid to stand up and say, we have this wonderful thing we want to share with people.
So what are you going to do about it? What's the next step?
Well, the next step, we've got the employment tribunal starting tomorrow against the school, but I have initiated legal action against the bishop and the diocese. Sadly, I didn't want to. Tried the internal means of getting them to realise they needed to make more sense. At one point, the safeguarding team gave the bishop the option, carry on with the safeguarding process, or say, well, actually, it's a theological matter and it's not safeguarding.
Yes.
So the safeguarding team didn't themselves insist it was safeguarding. They were that uncertain about it. They have no evidence of any harm, no victim. There's no allegation of any wrongdoing.
Well,
the bishop didn't take that chance. She said, no, do the safeguarding.
I'm going to have to wrap it up there, unfortunately. I could talk to you all day, but thank you so much, and I hope you win this. Now, it's important for us to note again that Trent College disputes Reverend Bernard's claims and remains committed to defending itself in the employment tribunal. Also, we must say that the Diocese of Derby told GB News Mr. Randall has never been an employee of the diocese, and the licence he held was as a result of his employment by Trent College. The Bishop of Derby is saddened to see Mr. Randall is bringing these grievances and has tried to ensure pastoral care for him. Given that he has started legal processes against the diocese and the Bishop of Derby, it would be inappropriate to comment further. We'll leave you guys to decide what you think of that.